and welcome to a very unusual video. Originally I wanted to cover something else, something like the massive Noxian story. But then I kinda became a father, and so now I need to save some time. So I hope you understand if I skip on the big stories for now, because I'm going to need some time. But knowing how YouTube works, taking a break is not the best idea. And so even if I have to release the most pointless videos possible, to the algorithms that is still better than nothing. And so the next two videos will be very easy for me to edit, but they are still something I promised to people. So today we are going to have a look at Project F, and next time we will cover all the remaining cards of Legends of Runeterra. So now, why don't we talk about Project F? Some of you may know that from all the games Wrights revealed during the anniversary, Project F was the game that excited me the most, even though we know pretty much nothing about it. And that's because when I was a kid, my first game that I ever completed to 100% was LEGO Star Wars. One of the best platforming adventure games to date. And here specifically I am talking about the original trilogy. There were also the prequels, which in the LEGO games came before that, and those were awesome as well, but episodes 4 to 6 were absolutely amazing. And as I said, this was my first game that I ever completed. I was absolutely in love with that game. And so when Wright revealed Project F, and they showed us this very short clip, I immediately got hyped because there is the chance that this is not a dungeon crawler. If Wright were to release a Diablo-like game, that would mean that this would be a live service. They would need dedicated servers for it, they would need to constantly update it, and they would simply have to make sure that the game stays alive. The thing is, right now, Wright is already balancing a lot. They have League of Legends, Teamfight Tactics, Legends of Runeterra, and now even Valorant. They have 4 games that they are working on. Adding in more might not be the smartest idea. After all, look at what happened to Blizzard. Blizzard is currently sitting on 7 projects: World of Warcraft, Diablo, StarCraft, Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, and Overwatch. And feel free to tell me how many of these live services are actually doing really well these days. WoW is doing pretty well, and I believe that Overwatch is barely hanging there. But the rest is falling apart very quickly. And that could be because Blizzard had to split their efforts across multiple games. I just really hope that Wright doesn't do the same mistake. So when it comes to me, I would prefer if this wasn't a Diablo hack and slash game. Speaking of which, let's talk about the possible genres. All we really know about this game is that it is supposed to be an exploring adventure game, and that's pretty much it. All the other clues we have are the teasers. Now, even though I don't want this game to be a live service, because there is just way too much of a risk, that doesn't necessarily mean there shouldn't be any dungeon crawler elements. For example, look at Link's Awakening. The remastered game had its own dungeon crawler aspects, and they worked really well. The way it works is that you can go through the entire story, but then besides that, you can also go through randomized dungeons, or even dungeons that other players built. And that's technically where the live element could be. We could have some dungeon crawling, but in a game where we are supposed to be exploring Runeterra, the adventure has to be the main part. That's what LEGO Star Wars really nailed. We'll get to this in a second, but the main part in an adventure game is the traveling. If you make that part good, you are sitting on gold. Here I would also like to point out that I wouldn't be mad if this game was aimed at kids. With League, TFT and Legends of Runeterra, you got your teenage audience covered. You slap in Valorant on top of that, and you got the hardcore shooter audience as well. There is no reason why Wright shouldn't be aiming at kids this time. Again, look at LEGO Star Wars. I think it is undeniable that even though this was a game for kids, 3+ by the way, pretty much everyone enjoyed it. And here, Wright can do the same. So now, I am about to go into the specific things I would like to see in the game. And here, if any writer is watching this video, please take my ideas. Although I am not a game developer myself, game development is something I really love to dabble in. Some people know that I started working on my own game, which is still something I want to release one day in the future. But I just love to listen to game developers talking about their games and explaining their design decisions. So again, even though I am technically not a game developer myself, I do believe that my ideas are not worthless. And so, since I mentioned that traveling is the most important part in an adventure game, let's start with that. Traveling can be done multiple ways. Usually in hack and slash games, traveling is really non-existent. You usually go from one area where you slaughtered a lot of creatures to another area where maybe there are different creatures. But the challenge in these games is making that part in the middle interesting. Walking from one area to the next only really works if the environment is extremely pretty. If you don't have interesting things in the background, you need to make the players think about why or how they are moving forward. And that's why you usually need puzzles. God of War was actually doing this relatively well. They had a good balance of combat and traversing puzzles. You had to free stuff with your axe. Sometimes you had to climb walls, which is the dumbest way to slow down the game, but even climbing walls works. Something like this also happened in the Fallen Order. There you too had to use some force jumps, or grab onto ropes, or again climb walls, because wall climbing has never been done before. Going back to LEGO Star Wars, because that game is probably going to be the most similar to this. There, depending on what character you played as, you were limited to specific actions. Jedis could use Force Build, which allowed them to build items that would help them move forward. Then there was normal building, which any character could do, and that was pretty much the same thing. Then there was hacking. By using droids or bounty hunters, you could hack into computers and open doors. Then there were high jumps. I know everyone hated Jar Jar Binks, but if he could do one thing well, it was jumping very high, so he could get to spots where other characters couldn't, and from there he could help the others. And then besides these traversing mechanics you had the fighters, and these were the characters who weren't really good at building anything, or moving fast or jumping high, but they were really good at fighting. What is interesting is that from the teaser, we know about 3 characters that are going to be part of this game. We know there is going to be Ezreal, Lux and Blitzcrank, and you could definitely apply similar rules to these. Imagine you are in a forest. There is a path you wanna follow, but there is a massive fallen tree blocking it. From here you have 3 options how to deal with this problem. If you are playing as Blitzcrank, you can lift up the fallen tree, by which you allow other players to go underneath it. This fits Blitzcrank's character really well, because he is a robot that is supposed to be helping people, and so him clearing the path for the other players makes sense. But then let's say you are playing as Ezreal. We know that Ezreal can blink around, and so what if Ezreal had the ability to blink through the tree? Yes, the other players would still stay behind, but that is definitely in line with Ezreal's character. He was always a bit selfish, and so him selfishly dealing with the problem on his own makes sense as well. And lastly, there is Lux. Now you could have Lux as the fighter. What if she can use her spells to deal with enemies really quickly? But on her own, she's awful at traversing the land. Maybe she needs Blitzcrank to get underneath the trees. Or perhaps she has her own traversing ability that is very limited. Maybe she could use her light to fire a hole through the tree. But then again, because she's using fire, that ability may not work for every problem. Maybe later on you need to get over a gap. Ezreal can blink over it. Blitzcrank could use his arms to get to the other side. But in this situation, Lux couldn't do anything. And so perhaps it would be cool if Lux relied on Blitzcrank to pull her to the other side. This is how you can make the traveling in an adventure game fun. You need to have different characters that can deal with problems in their own different ways. And it is totally fine if one character can't do anything, as long as the others can help them. So with that said, we need to talk about what characters would we like to see in the game. Or rather, what characters would make sense in the game. We need adventurers who can travel around the world. And they have to be someone who is mostly independent of any region, because it needs to make sense for them to travel to any other region. So besides Blitzcrank, Lux and Ezreal, I wrote a list of champions who would fit these adventures. First of all, we could definitely have Akali. It was revealed that Akali isn't afraid of traveling abroad. And in Piltover we learned that she can even speak some other languages as well. And because Akali is very agile, and she has her ropes and other tools to move around, the traversing with her could also be fun. And character-wise, she would definitely fit into the team as the hot-headed solo assassin. Next up we could have Lee Sin. Now Lee Sin on his own traveled around quite a lot already. But in this kind of an adventure game, character-wise, Lee Sin could be the wise tour guide. Maybe if the team goes to Ionia, Lee Sin could be the one explaining what is happening there. He could almost serve as the narrator for Ionia. Of course, as a fighter, Lee Sin would excel during the fighting parts. But with his Dragon's Kick, you could also use him for the traversing. For example, he could kick over a tree to make a bridge over a gap. So Lee Sin would definitely fit in as well. Then I thought that perhaps Lucian and Senna would be great as well. All they really do is travel around Runeterra anyway. They are just looking for places where they think that the Ruined King may appear. But the issue with these two is that they are going to have their own game. The Ruined King game is probably going to feature them, and so I don't think Wright will want to make them a part of another game. With that said, there is another character who actually behaves somewhat similar to Lucian, and that is Olaf, believe it or not. Olaf is a Viking who travels around the world looking for a glorious death, and we could even find him fighting alongside Misfortune and Lucian when the Harrowing arrived in Bilgewater, because let's be honest, fighting giant undead kraken worms is a good way. What is also interesting is that technically Olaf is independent of Freljord. Yes, he's still technically marked as a part of the Wintersclaw tribe, but I don't think the modern lore ever mentions that. And if his Viking tribe is a part of the Wintersclaw tribe, he is still traveling around the world looking for a glorious death. Then it would be cool if Wright could sprinkle in some Yordles. Lore-wise, the Yordles did not hit the spotlight yet, and so giving us Poppy, Tristana or Lulu, 3 Yordles who travel around the world, simply looking for adventures, would definitely make sense. And since the Yordles know Runeterra really well, similar to what I said about Lee Sin, they could serve as our guides. Whenever we get to an unexplored area, the Yordles could explain what is happening there. Then, taking characters from other regions, I think that Quinn would also make sense. Quinn does have fleshed out lore, but as an adventuring scout, she could definitely use some expanded story from other games. But then I realized that perhaps there is also room for Talia. Talia's entire story arc is that she's traveling from Ionia to Freljord to Shurima. She only went to Freljord because there she used the mountains to go down, because you know she can surf on rocks. But still, the point of her character is that she's traveling home. And that is the only reason why she also wouldn't work. Because lore-wise, she traveled to Shurima to find her family and save them from Azir, who is now rising as an emperor again. And so, story-wise, I don't see why she would be traveling around with Blitzcrank, Lux and Ezreal. But another exotic character who would make sense would be Wukong. Wukong's story arc with Master Yi is pretty much done. In the latest story, Master Yi was kinda finishing teaching Wukong how to fight and how to use the Wuju technique. But after that, I don't see a reason why Wukong couldn't just travel around and have his own adventures. And honestly, with his expanding staff, jumping over gaps and dealing with puzzles with Wukong would be really fun. I think he would be an excellent adventurer. And the last character I think would fit here is obviously Ryze. Since we are supposed to be exploring Runeterra, you can't find a better character. Everything Ryze is doing is connected to traveling around Runeterra and looking for the world runes. And with his arcane magic, both fighting and traveling with him could be really fun. But here lies the problem. You can't just add in random characters, because in order for this game to make sense, you need all of your characters to have a unified goal. Even if they have different motivations, they all need to be doing the same thing. The easiest way to deal with this would be to make them look for something powerful. Everyone likes to hold power, but perhaps the characters would want it for different reasons. If we were looking for a world rune, Ryze would want it to save the world. Ezreal would want it because it is an interesting artifact. Lux would want it because perhaps she could save Demacia from Sylas. And Blitzcrank would be there because he just likes to help people. But other than the world runes, you need to get really crafty to figure out the right goal. And I really wonder what Wright will go with. Ideally, you also want to explore the entire Runeterra on this quest. I would love to see at least one mission in every region, but that might be impossible, because I have no idea why would anyone go to the Shadow Isles. Speaking of which, this brings me to specific levels. And here is where I want Wright to really take my ideas. Because since they said that we will be exploring Runeterra, I really want them to focus on the fact that every region should feel different. What you are doing there should be different, and how the environment behaves should be different. For example, in Piltover there is the Howler, which is this giant elevator that is connecting Piltover and Zone. So one of the missions could be your simple elevator level. Maybe we would be fighting inside the Howler, and as the elevator stops in different levels across Piltover and Zone, different enemies step into the elevator. Up there in Piltover you have the cops, who might wanna stop us because we stole something important in Piltover. You know, there is Ezreal with us after all, I wouldn't be surprised. But then as we go further and further down, we start meeting Camp Barons and Intelligencers and other Zonites who would like to steal what we have. And so as the elevator moves down, perhaps because at the very bottom of Zone there is actually the river so we could escape on a ship, maybe there could be more and more dangerous enemies, with even someone like Warwick waiting at the very bottom. Then perhaps in another level we could have a look at Freljord. Now in Freljord I can definitely picture a level where as you travel across the frozen tundras, in the background you can see those who endure, which are these giant goat gods. And as you run around, occasionally from the background they shoot a laser at you to the foreground. And that's how you would connect the environment, and you would make it feel alive. Or you could simply use the storm and the volibear. Perhaps at the beginning of the mission you could see the storm on the horizon, but the further and further you progress, the storm gets closer and closer. And at the end you would be fighting with time, because the Ursine could come. That's what really happens in Freljord. We could even see that in the Ash comic, so I really hope Wright embraces that idea. Then in Demacia, where we have Petricide, perhaps it would be possible that Lux couldn't use her spells. And the only way for her to do that would be after Blitzcrank and Ezreal clear away all the Petricide. That way you can have the other characters interact with how Lux behaves. And of course, this mechanic would be exclusive to Demacia, because again, we need to make every region feel different. Then in Ionia you could have the nature going against you. Perhaps, as I talked about the fallen trees blocking your path, if you figure out how to walk around the tree, you won't disturb it. But there could be the easy way to just cut through it. But the more trees you cut down along the way, the more nature enemies you will fight at the end. Again, that's how you make Ionia feel different. If you treat nature like crap, it will treat you the same way. Then in Shurima you could have the Voidborn digging up from underground. And who knows, maybe when you get to the point where you get overwhelmed, Rammus could roll in, and he would start eating all the Voidborn insects. You know, because he does that in the lore. The alternative thing to do in Shurima would be, obviously, delving into tombs. And in fact, it would be super awesome if the tutorial level would be Ezreal picking up the Glove of Nezuk. Maybe that's how you start the adventure. You start as Ezreal, and you learn how to use the traversing mechanics as you pick up the glove that gives Ezreal the power. But then, perhaps in Bilgewater, the level could take place on a ship. And as you sail around, you get attacked by sea monsters and pirates. And lastly, there could be a level in Noxus, where maybe you need to sneak through the crowds dressed as a Noxian, trying to blend in while avoiding Swain's ravens. Noxus is a region where you don't really want to stand out, unless you are powerful, because you are risking the fact that someone is going to take you down. So hiding in the crowds pretending to be Noxians would really fit that region as well. But that is it for my ideas. As I said, Riot, please take them from me. As someone who likes the lore and the world you guys made, I really want Project F to be successful. I doubt we are ever going to get an MMO, but Project F could be the closest thing we get to exploring the world. So please, make sure the exploration is actually awesome. When we get to different regions, make sure those different regions really feel different. And make sure what we do in those regions is also different. That's how you give us the vibes of what is happening there. So with that is pretty much all I wanted to say. Again, sorry for this weird video, but I really need to save some time. Fatherhood is not going to be easy, and I need to take a break at least for a week. But again, I know YouTube. If I take a break and then upload something 2 weeks later, no one will get notified. So, thank you for being here, and let's hope the channel doesn't die randomly. Looking at the size of the Noxian story though, I might. Hey, did you know that we have social media and Twitch where we talk about other League facts and stories? And did you know that we have neat mugs and shirts too? The links to all of that will be below. And as always, thank you, come again.